and welcome back to the Holistic Health Book Club. Currently, we are reading Blueprint for Health by Dr. Annabelle Lee Warren and Joe Willard, and today we will be reading Chapter 2, which is The Immutable Laws of Life, and it begins with a quote. Nature, to be commanded, must be obeyed. Francis Bacon, from Novum Organis, English philosopher, 1561 to 1626. And excuse my voice if I sound a little nasally, I'm under the weather. All right, let's begin. Every day we are a witness to the unchanging phenomena and order of the universe, i.e., the demonstration of natural laws. These laws are formulas which describe uniformities of nature. They are not haphazard occurrences. Rather, they are based on regulations of universal order which are intrinsic and eternal. Natural laws prevail throughout both the inorganic and organic domains of our universe. Every living creature on our planet is subordinate to these very laws. Wild animals intrinsically adhere to natural laws as they are endowed with an inborn survival reaction which manifests in behavior specifically characteristic to their species. Human life is also subject to these same laws, but lacking the advantage of instinct, must rely on its own intelligence to interpret and utilize these laws beneficially. One of the most fundamental of the laws, the law of self-preservation, is the controlling expression of all life, from the single-celled organism to the most complex forms of animal life. Dr. Robert Walter, 1841 to 1921, expressed this as follows in what he referred to as life's great law. Every particle of living matter in the organized body is endowed with an instinct of self-preservation, sustained by a force inherent in the organism, usually called vital force of life, the success of whose work is directly proportioned to the amount of the force and inversely to the degree of its activity. Dr. Walter considered this law to be the foremost law of health and life. The invisible vital force, which he refers to, carries out its mission of self-preservation in every cell of the animal organism. And not just to preserve it, but to sustain it to the highest degree of health. If it were not for this genetically encoded blueprint, life would not long prevail. The human body offers us an excellent model to view the intelligence of this invisible vital force. This contains more than 125 trillion cells. Each of these cells is analogous to a supercity containing mitochondria and organelles. These two cellular components form a complementary unit to make the cell self-sufficient in its operations, creating an organism within itself. This calculates to quadrillion organisms within the human body. Consider the great wisdom of the body's intellect, i.e., the encoded information that guides the destiny of every one of these cellular organisms within the total complex system. Physiology teaches that the cell is a colony of sophisticated bacteria that have banded together for their common welfare. Carrying this premise a step further, it may be said that the human body is made up of sophisticated cells that have banded together for their common welfare. This mutual welfare is created by the cells functioning as a unit for the benefit of the entire organism. These cells will continue to act in unison and perform in harmony for the welfare of the human body as long as they are provided in the essential materials and conditions necessary to its maintenance. These are as follows: clean air, pure water, sunshine, foods which are biologically suited to the human body, freedom from poisons, stress, and violence. Given these essentials, the brain will carry out the rest of the task. It is the kingpin behind the efficient and harmonious operation of producing an environment that allows for perfect health. In fact, the brain will recruit forces of the organism to destroy any cells which become a threat to its harmonious physiological function. Its ultimate goal is to preserve life. To comprehend the enormity of the task, imagine 30,000 Earths, each with upward of 3 to 4 billion inhabitants, all acting in unison for a common cause. This is analogous to the body's colossal intellect. What an exciting and valuable possession to have a live-in robot that works marvels inside our body without our having to give instructions. As stated in life's great law, the vital force is constantly operating for the health and life of the body every second that life is present. Its work is inherently programmed and cannot be improved upon. Regardless of conditions imposed upon it, living matter shows that it always strives for perfection. This dedication of vital force cannot be terminated, only stifled short of death. Even then, it will compensate and proceed with constant momentum until it is totally expended. See law of vital accommodation. Additionally, this is the primary law of self-preservation. There are secondary laws referred to collectively as the laws of vital relation. These are as follows. We have the law of action. Whenever actions occur in the living organism as the result of extraneous influences, the action must be ascribed to the living thing which has the power of action and not to the dead whose leading characteristic is inertia. If the living organism is subjected to a particular stimulus, the organism will respond with an appropriate reaction. If a dead organism is subjected to the same stimulus, there will be no reaction. This is due to the fact that the action is inherent in the living matter, not in the stimulus itself. In other words, the body acts on lifeless substances such as food or medicines and not the other way around. The response is from within the organism, and its force is directly proportional to the amount of vital force present in the organism. We may illustrate this law with the following example. A laxative drug is used to induce bowel action. Although it is commonly stated that the drug acts on the bowels, actually the reverse is true. The bowels act on the drug. The only action which any drug is capable is chemical action, and this bowel action is not chemical action. From this moment of ingestion, it is the living organism that is acting on the drug. When this drug reaches the bowels, the appropriate reaction takes place, and it is said that the drug has done its job. But we should ask ourselves, why did the drug occasion this response in the body? The chemical union of drugs within any of the fluids and tissues of the body is destructive to them. The body recognizes them as irritants, and the bowels act to eliminate them to secure self-preservation. This bowel action is vital action, and the power of the action is inherent in the bowels, not in the drug. Cool. Next, we have the law of power. The power employed and consequently expended in any vital or medicinal action is vital power, that is, power within and not from without. It is the vital power of the living organism that acts on drugs and other irritants and stimulants, as other substances have no power and cannot act. The threatened dangers of the body from these caustic substances in the occasion of the body to use its vital power in an effort to expel them. The degree or force of the power is relative to the vitality of the person expending the power. The more vitality a person possesses, the greater the response of offending material. A person who is nearly dead will have no or little response to such substances. Next, we have the law of distribution. In proportion to the importance of the needs of the various organs and tissues of the body is the power of the body whether much or little apportioned out among them. This law states that the body's intelligence wisely distributes its vital power according to the importance and the needs of organisms, so long as there is sufficient power to distribute. If an inadequate supply of power is available, the body will falter its work and will carry on the best it can under these circumstances. And then we have the law of dual effects. The secondary effect upon the living organism of any act, habit, indulgence, or agent is the act of opposite and equal of the primary effect. To illustrate this law, let us consider the effects of a stimulant such as coffee, tobacco, or other drugs. The primary but temporary effect of these substances is to stimulate the body into a heightened but false sense of well-being. However, the secondary and longer-lasting effect is to produce weakness and exhaustion. These irritants do not add power to the body, but rather cause the body to expend power by eliminating these toxic substances from its domain. Dr. Shelton explains it in this way. Alcohol permanently weakens because it temporarily strengthens. Opium permanently produces sleeplessness, nervousness, and pain because it temporarily relieves these conditions. A cup of coffee will relieve headache, but in doing it, permanently fastens the headache habit upon the patient. It will relieve mental depression, but when the user is deprived of his coffee, he will become doubly depressed. Tobacco steadies the nerve only to unsteady them. Tonics strengthen only to debilitate. Purging produces constipation. Diuretics produce inactivity of the kidneys. Cholagogues, acid bile, result in torpidity in the liver. If the habitual user of any drug will cease its use for a few days, he will experience in its fullness all its secondary effects. He will then return to his use of the drug. He will be delighted to find that these secondary effects are cured by it. The disease is cured by its cause. Coffee cures the headache which it produced. Whiskey restores the feeling of strength it has wasted. Tobacco, the steadiness of nerve it has destroyed. The law of dual effects applies to all actions of life. Work and play, rest and sleep. Each have their corresponding and primary and secondary effects. Activity may give the appearance of increased vigor, but eventually this gives rise to tiredness, fatigue, and exhaustion. On the contrary, rest and sleep produce weakness first so that the recuperation and reinvigoration are restored. Next, we have the law of vital accommodation, nature's balance wheel. The response of the vital organism to external stimuli is an instinctive one, based upon a self-preservation instinct which adapts to itself whatever influence it cannot destroy or control. This law explains how the body survives the repeated onslaught of harmful substances, alcohol, tobacco, coffee, etc., by gradual adaptation. Rather than totally succumb, the body will respond less violently and learn to tolerate the offending material. With repeated use, action grows less and less until one is able to use the original amount without producing the original result. Without the instinctive response by the organism, it would not long survive the habitual indulgence of poisons. An example of this adaptive response by the body is seen throughout all the tissues and organs that come in contact with toxic irritants. The lining of the mouth, stomach, and intestine will harden and thicken as a protective measure. However, it should be understood that this adaptation is regressive, i.e., less than normal, and the body's vitality is used in the process. This leads to yet another law which explains further the body's attempt to preserve life. The law of limitation. Whenever and wherever the expenditure of vital power has advanced so far that the that a vital exhaustion is imminent, a check is put upon the unnecessary expenditure of power, and the organism rebels against the further use of an accustomed stimulant. This law is demonstrated whenever overstimulation of a toxic substance is wasted the energies of a life almost to the fatal point. This may be observed in the use of a medical drug whereby the patient no longer responds favorably to the prescribed curative agent but instead rebels against it. The same holds true for those who habitually indulge in the use of tobacco, alcohol, coffee, etc. Eventually, they reach a point at which they can no longer crave their accustomed stimulant. Next, we have the law of special economy. The vital organism, under favorable conditions, stores up all excess vital funds above the current expenditures as reserve fund to be employed in the time of special need. The body will store energy during periods of rest and sleep that may call upon these reserves in times of emergencies such as exist when health is impaired. Next, we have the law of stimulation. Whenever any tonic or irritating agent or influence bear upon the living organism, this occasions vital resistance and excitation manifest in increased and impaired action, which always necessarily diminishes the action power and does so in precisely the degree to which it accelerates action. The increased action is caused by the extra expenditure of vital power called out, not supplied by the compulsory process, and therefore the available supply of the power is diminished by this amount. The most significant principle stated here is that stimulants do not provide vital power, and instead they cause vital power to be expended in resisting their influence. Stimulants produce a downward tendency, i.e., away from the norm. And last but not least, we have the law of repose. Whenever action in the animal body has expended the substance and available energy of the body, rest is demanded and received in order to replenish the substance and recuperation of power. Activity must be balanced with periods of repose. There are no substances for rest and sleep. There are no substitutes for rest and sleep. A cold plunge or a hot shower may provide temporary exhilaration, but they will not provide what is really needed. To deny the body its need to recuperate its vital energy is to begin the process of impaired health. The foregoing natural laws guided the hygienic pioneers in their care of the sick. They recognized the most important concept called the Vix Meretrix Naturae, which states that the living matter heals itself independent of medical art. Although this concept was recognized by others in the medical field, its practical application was not readily employed. They preferred the orthodox treatments which they had been taught. Throughout the entire history of medicine, unfamiliar concepts and deeds have always met these with great resistance. All great truths have emerged only after years of denial and persecution of their discoverers. Dr. William Harvey, 1578 to 1657, was denounced and called a quack when he discovered the circulation of the blood. Dr. Franz Joseph Gall, 1758 to 1828, was also maligned when he proved the brain is the organ of the mind. And Dr. Ignaz Philipp Semmelweis, 1818 to 1865, and Dr. Alines Wendell Holmes, 1809 to 1894, were driven from the practice of medicine when they discovered and declared that physicians were killing mothers in childbirth with their dirty hands. In more recent times, Dr. Herbert Shelton, 1895 to 1985, was constantly harassed by the medical establishment because of the success he realized by his health school. He spent almost 50 years supervising approximately 40,000 fasts, returning his patients to a healthier life, while the hospital death rate was increasing. Although he never prescribed medication nor utilized any of the practices of the medical doctors, he was accused of practicing medicine without a license. He worked to pave the way for present-day hygienic practitioners. That's where we're going to end chapter 2 today.